Anyway, topic of today's video. I'm going to share my 2023 knitting plans / making plans. Honestly, it's all knitting projects, so if it looks like a duck, the projects I'm going to share, the specific projects, are really only the projects that I plan to, without a doubt, complete in 2023. So these are my non-negotiables. These are the projects I absolutely want to complete this year. There are probably more than a dozen other projects, garment projects specifically, that I'm not going to mention in this video because those are kind of just like, if I get to them next year, it'll be a bonus. But at the bare minimum, I want to knit through the list I'm going to share with you guys today. If you haven't been staying in the loop on what I've been posting and sharing, the Great No Buy of 2023 is live. It's alive and well. I am committing to not purchasing any yarn for the entire calendar year of 2023. I'll talk more about that at the end. Please pick up your jaw from the floor, okay? We'll get into that later. But for now, let's talk about the projects that I'm excited to complete this year. So as a high-level overview, we have 6 pairs of socks, we have 6 sweaters for myself, we have 3 tanks / tee or summer garments for myself, and we have 3 gift knits. And anything beyond the items that I'm going to list in this video are going to be a bonus. But at the bare minimum, I want to get these items done this year. So a little bit about the 6 sock goal. So a few months ago, Catrice of Cadence Cozies over on Instagram shared that she would like to pursue a goal of knitting 1 sock per month in 2023 because her, like myself, and I'm sure like many of you guys, have a tendency to acquire sock yarn and not actually follow through on the sock knitting. Personally, sock yarn is the one type of yarn that I would allow myself to sort of buy randomly in single skein quantities without specific patterns or projects in mind to make with that yarn. So more often than not, I'll buy it with the best of intentions, but unfortunately my sock knitting mojo is very fickle and I have a tendency not to follow through on any sock projects, even though I buy sock yarn pretty regularly. So at this point, I don't even know how many socks worth of sock yarn that I have in my collection. But one of the projects on my list that I'm going to share is actually going to eat up a good portion of that sock yarn. But outside of that, I do want to commit to knitting 1 sock per month. And so that by the end of 2023, I will have 6 completed pairs of socks, which is more than I have in my total collection now. And I think if I can stick to that, I'll be really, really happy with the result at the end of the year. Alright, so let's talk about the sweaters I want to knit for myself. I have 6 on this list, and I think a sweater every other month is totally reasonable. Going through my yarn stash, I have probably at least 13 sweaters worth of yarn. Part of me wanted to commit to knitting 1 sweater a month throughout the entire year of 2023. Which is not outside of the realm of possibility, but I think it is quite a leap because this past year I think I've knit 5 or 6 sweaters in total. I want to set myself up for success to the extent possible, and I'm just going to call it at 6 sweaters. I 100% believe I'll probably surpass that amount, but as of now, I have a list of 6 sweaters that I absolutely would like to complete this year. And that's not to say that the other sweater quantities in my collection don't have projects plans associated with them. I have also assigned sweaters to all of the sweater quantities in my collection, but I think those are more subject to change than the sweaters I'm going to share today. So the first sweater I want to knit for myself in 2023, and this is in no particular order. The first project I'll share is actually not a pattern that exists. It is another self-drafted pattern that I plan to knit for myself. I have a store-bought sweater from the Levi's store that I bought over 10 years ago. Actually, I didn't buy, my dad bought it as a Christmas gift for me, and my body has changed since then, so I want to recreate a hand knit version of it that fits me a lot better today. That sweater is going to be a top-down circular yoke sweater. I'll pop in a picture of what the store-bought sweater looks like. Here's the yarn. So this is woolstock worsted. The top color is called Gravel Road, and the white color is called Highland Fleece. So this will be the sort of top yoke color, and this will be the bottom. And there's going to be some color work in there. You'll see in the picture what that looks like, but this is what I'm going to use to recreate that sweater. The next sweater is the Ward sweater by Sloan Rosenthal. So this is another worsted weight pattern, and I plan to use Patton's Classic Wool worsted in the color Natural Mix. It's a really nice heathered gray brown color. I have 9 balls of this, which I believe is more than enough in terms of yardage required for this pattern. And I'm really excited about this pattern because I'm actually knitting this alongside my friend Felicia at One Whip Wonder. Both of our birthdays are in February, and she pitched the excellent idea of casting this on together as a birthday sort of knit along, birthday month knit along. So I thought that was really fun. She's going to use the yarn called for in the pattern, which is the Hudson & West Forge yarn. But I'm really excited. I think this will complement that pattern very nicely. It is a seamed sweater that is textured all over. I think there's a panel of what looks like garter stitch in the middle that is framed by 2 columns of cables, and the rest of the sweater is a textured knit and purl pattern. I think it's called the Andalusian stitch, and it has a really dramatic sort of cowl neck, mock neck situation. I think it looks really nice, and I'm excited to knit more seamed sweaters. So I'm really excited to cast that on. We've both been sort of chomping at the bit to cast that on, but she's currently knee deep in a very intricate and involved sample knit that I think has a deadline of February. So as soon as she finishes that, we will be ready to cast this on. I think in the meantime, I'm definitely going to knit myself a swatch so that I'm just ready to cast on when the time comes. So yeah, excited about that plan. The next sweater on my list is the Pitch Coat by Emily Green. I fell in love with this pattern probably a couple of years ago at the very beginning of my knitting journey, and it always seemed so unattainable to me because it is heavily cabled, it is seamed, it is just a very aspirational knit, or at least it was a couple years ago when I first started knitting. But now that I'm more confident in my knitting skills, I am more than excited to start this project. I really wanted like a classic camel color, light brown, sort of between a brown and a beige. I think it's a really lovely color, and I haven't seen a lot of yarn on the market that sort of gave me the effect that I was looking for. I sort of put out a desperate call for suggestions to those of you who follow me on Instagram. This was months ago, and I was like, I need a camel colored yarn. I really want to knit this pattern, the Pitch Coat, in a good camel color, like a classic camel brown color. And I got a lot of really great suggestions, most of which unfortunately were hand dyed yarn, and I wasn't interested in knitting this up in a hand dyed yarn. So Emily Green, who actually designed this pattern, eventually messaged me saying, actually Hudson & West is coming out with a camel color soon. And I'm like, what? So I stalked them and I waited for them to release the color, and it was perfect. It was everything I imagined, and this is the color. It's called Camel. So nothing revolutionary. I feel like this lighting I have is sort of washing this color out. So I don't know how well it's registering here, but yeah, I think it'll be perfect. And I'm so excited to knit this cardigan with this yarn. So about the pattern itself, yes, it is seamed, it is cabled, it is oversized, it has like extra long sleeves that can be folded up, and it just looks very cozy and wearable. And I think it will be a really good piece to wear as sort of a light jacket in the fall months before it gets too cold and you need a proper jacket. But those in between months, I think this will look really nice. So I'm hoping to knit this sometime before the summer ends so that I can wear it as much as possible through the fall season. Oof, I need to speed this up. So the next sweater I want to knit in 2023 is the Fairy Building Sweater by Sloan Rosenthal. So Sloan Rosenthal is actually one of the co-founders of Hudson & West, the makers of this yarn and the yarn that I'm going to use to knit this sweater. It's actually designed in the Hudson & West weld yarn, which is the yarn that I purchased to make it. So this is the first time in my entire 2 years of knitting or yarn crafting ever in my life that I'm actually knitting or crocheting an item with the yarn that the item calls for. I got it in the lake color, which is a nice blue color. I think on the screen it is showing up a lot more bright than I would say it looks in person. Like this to me is more of a grayish blue. What I see on the screen I think is a bit too, like, I wouldn't wear anything in that color, but what I'm seeing in person, I promise, looks a lot more understated. It is another seamed garment, so yeah, that's gonna be fun. And it has a really generous cowl neck, which is a lot of additional knitting, and it has a really wide body, so there's a lot of positive ease in this design. So I have, for the size I want to knit, it calls for 10 skeins, 10 50-gram skeins, which I think equates to, how many yards is in a 50-gram skein? 200 yards, 400 yards, 2,000 yards of yarn. So this is going to be quite the commitment. I want to probably start this in the spring. Who knows when I'll actually start it, but I definitely want to get this done in 2023. So the next sweater on my list is the Patchwork Pullover by Sorella. So this is a DK weight pattern. It is also knit flat. I don't know if you're picking up on the theme here. It is knit flat and seamed. It is knit using a colorwork technique called intarsia, which basically means that you have all of the colors that you're working with in a particular row attached to your work at once, and you knit with the current color, drop it, pick up the next color, knit across, drop it, pick up the next color, and so forth. And you go back and forth in rows in that fashion. I've done intarsia and crochet for a baby blanket. I have not done intarsia knitting. I don't think it'll be that difficult, but I do anticipate that it's going to be a kind of an annoying project to work on, because there, I think, at least for the size shown in the sample, there are 5 colors for one row. So at any given point in time, you are having 5 balls of yarn attached to your project that you have to work with. And I just expect that's going to be really fiddly and annoying to do. But it is going to be worth it, because the main reason I want to make this pattern is because I want to use up those, so you know those random skeins of sock yarn that I mentioned before that I would like allow myself to buy with no concrete project plans. Yeah, that's pretty much 90% of what's going into this project. So the sock yarns that I have are fingering, so I intend to hold them double for this particular project, but it is the perfect project to sort of use up any single skeins of hand-dyed yarn or DK weight or even fingering weight yarn, throw them all together to make one single project. they're all piled up here in my yarn stash behind me and I don't feel like picking them up, but let's call it a surprise. So whenever I get around to knitting it, we'll sort of see it come to life together. You'll see all of the colors that I plan to use, but I'm really excited for this project specifically to use those single skeins because, as I mentioned before, my sock knitting mojo is very fickle. So it's far more likely for me to use all of those sock yarns in one sort of cohesive garment knit as opposed to the individual sock projects that I would otherwise use that yarn for. And knowing myself, I know the sweater is definitely more likely to happen than the multiple pairs of socks. So I'm doing myself a favor using up that sock yarn and also hopefully having a really wearable and fun sweater at the end of it. Next up on my sweater list is the Muna jumper. So this is a pattern designed by Kari Helene Rain. I probably mispronounced that terribly. I do apologize. It's a worsted weight pattern and it looks to be knit up in fisherman's rib. It's knit flat and seamed. Another one. I think of the 6 sweaters I'm sharing today, 5 of them are seamed. That's hilarious. The yarn I plan to use is more Hudson West. This is the honey color. I bought this in person at Indie Untangled back in October, and this is one of, I think, 3 or 4 Rhinebeck specific or Rhinebeck exclusive colorways that they released ahead of Indie Untangled, and this was the one that caught my heart. I think on the screen is showing up as like a chartreuse, kind of a greenish color, but the colorway is called Honey, and I don't know how well this color suits me, but I really like it. Really like it. So I plan to knit up the Muna jumper in this yarn. So those are the 6 sweaters I have planned for 2023. Honorable mention is my current whip, which is the Salty Sweater by Kadri. I am using a DK weight yarn from Studio Dog Fibers, and I am about halfway through the first sleeve. I don't have it here to show you, but I'll pop in a picture of my progress as of today. That will definitely not be finished in 2022 because as you're seeing this, it's still a whip and it is already 2023. Let's move on to summer tops. I have 3 on my non-negotiable list that I absolutely intend to knit this year. The first, oh goodness. I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, but it appears to be French. It's definitely French. The pattern is called Baignus. Baignus? Why did I try? It's a pattern by Emily Lewis, and it's a stockinette. Very basic tank, and this might change honestly because I'm not crazy about the amount of stitches that would need to be picked up to knit this. That is one of my least favorite things, is picking up stitches, but as of right now that is a plan that I have, but it could change. The yarn I'm going to use is this Odine Wools Interlock by Knit Crate. RIP Knit Crate. I actually got this in a yarn swap a couple of months ago. My friend Felicia and I went to a local yarn store. They were hosting a yarn swap. Again, super washed out because this lighting is just doing the most. But it's kind of like a very subtle rosy color, and there's a very low contrast variegation in this yarn. So there are chunks of the rose color and then chunks of a sort of light cream color, and it's 34% cotton, 35% linen, 19% lyocell, and it is, according to Ravelry, this is a sport weight yarn, and the pattern that I'm going to knit is also a sport weight pattern, so hopefully I can get gauged with no issues. But yeah, it's a very simple, I think it'll be really wearable, no fuss type of pattern. So I'm looking forward to knocking that out. It'll be a really quick and satisfying project. The next top I have is called the Feldspar Tee by Hannah Lubin. And I'm going to knit that up in this yarn bee yarn called Bambootiful. And the color is called Mustard. I like yellow. It's a very loud color, which is not my thing, but I think it'll be really nice for the summer. So that's the plan with this yarn. And the last summer garment I plan to knit for myself in 2023 is the Luna Tee by Carissa Lamb. The yarn I plan to use is the Hobby Twister Solid. This yarn was gifted to me over the summer in 2022 as a part of some sponsored content that I did with them. And it's a really pretty rust color. I'll pop in a picture of that yarn because it's downstairs. I don't have it in this room with me. But this Luna Tee is actually a test knit that I signed up for and got selected for, and ultimately decided I didn't have the capacity to do it. So I had to unfortunately back out of that test knit, which I really felt bad about in the moment, but it was all for the best. Now that I'm on the other side of that and I have the capacity to knit it, I'm excited to knit it. And yeah, I think it'll be a really fun project. The next category of projects that I want to knit are gifts. So I haven't shared what I gifted in 2022. There wasn't a lot. There were a couple of big pieces, but volume wise it was very low. And I'm kind of taking the same approach this year. So I was watching a recent video from Lizzie, I think is her name. Yes, of Hive Knits. And she was sharing how her sort of gift knitting strategy is to pick one person from her immediate family and knit them a garment or like a larger project. And I thought that was a really good idea because I love gift knitting when I'm in the mood for it. I don't like being asked to knit things for people. It makes me not want to knit it, but I love knitting things for people out of sort of my own motivation. And it's very easy for me to get overwhelmed. In 2021, I was overwhelmed because I sort of overcommitted in terms of the number of items that I was knitting for gifts. Last year, or in 2022, I wasn't overwhelmed because I sort of intentionally decided not to make that mistake again. And so the volume was way down, but I did knit a couple of larger pieces, specifically garments for my mom. And I knit a hat for my dad. And that was my gift knitting for the holiday season. And it felt really nice to not sort of have all of these gift knitting commitments. And when Lizzie sort of explained picking one person from their immediate family to make a larger project for, it sort of lit a light bulb in my head because I was like, that is perfect. That sounds like an incredible idea. And it's sort of something that I did in 2022, albeit I didn't do it intentionally. It was kind of how it worked out. So I decided going forward to be more deliberate about that decision and picking one person from my immediate family to knit a larger gift for. And this year is going to be my brother. So I say all that to say, when I knit through all of the worsted weight sweaters in my knitting plans that I share with you, I'm gonna have, I'm sure, little bits and bops of leftovers from each of those projects. And I think the good thing about those projects is, and I'll just grab them here for example's sake, I think they coordinate really nicely together. And I am going to use whatever leftovers I have to make the Kai Fella sweater. This is a sweater by Knitwits and Yarns. His name is Brendan Girac, I believe. I did a test knit for him actually earlier in 2022, completely irrelevant. But a few months ago when he was releasing this pattern, I shared it to my stories, and my brother actually responded expressing a desire to have one, and it got the wheels turning in my head, and I was like, this will be the perfect stash buster. And because I'm not big on color, I feel like all of my sort of leftover scraps coordinate in some way. So I was like, perfect. His birthday is in December. Christmas is in December. So he is who I have selected to be my big knit gift recipient for 2023. And I'm going to make the Kai Fella sweater. Now, full disclosure, I'm probably going to have to supplement the yarns. I may not have enough of each of the colors I want to put into it. So it might result in me having to buy yarn to actually execute this project, which is totally fine. But I'm excited to knit that sweater, another intarsia sweater, another seamed sweater. Other gift knit is a 2x2 ribbed hat for my husband. So I bought a skein of superwash worsted weight gray yarn from a local yarn store, and I plan to knit that up for him to put it into his winter hat rotation. He actually had one that I knit for him, but unfortunately he machine washed and dried it, so it got felted, unfortunately, and that's okay. It's just an excuse to knit another thing, so I'm gonna make that for him next year. And then the last gift knit that I have on my list is the head sock. This is a pattern by Amanda Steck. It's actually a free pattern, fingering weight, similar idea to the 2x2 hat, only it is in fingering weight. And I want to knit this in this lovely green color for my former manager that works at my company. As a just because thanks for a few years of being a great manager kind of a thing. I don't report to her anymore, but I've had the idea of knitting her a hat for some time now, and I think the color is going to complement her very well because she has this really vibrant red hair. And yeah, I think that's going to be a really nice gift for her. All right, so those are the specific patterns and projects that I want to knit this year / next year. As I'm recording this is December 31st, so I'm using the term this year and next year interchangeably. Sorry if it's confusing. What I did want to share is my 2023 no buy details. Not buying yarn for an entire year. That's a bit extreme, but I'm going to power through because I have a lot of yarn and I need to work through it. It's taking up space in my home and my mind. It's giving me anxiety, and I would love to work through it. So I'm going to commit to not buying yarn for 2023, with the exception of any fiber festivals that I decide to attend. I don't have any on my schedule at this present moment, but that could change. And if I get invited or if I decide to go to a fiber festival in 2023, I will allow myself to buy some yarn there. I just won't go crazy and buy multiple sweater quantities. I'm gonna limit myself to one sweater quantity per festival that I attend. And I think that's pretty reasonable. Now, I can acquire yarn by other means. So for example, if I participate in a yarn swap, I exchange some of the yarn from my stash with some yarn from someone else's stash. It has a net zero impact on my stash. We're all good there. Another exception is acquiring yarn by way of gifts or sponsored yarn. So if a company reaches out to me and says, hey, we want to send you this yarn to do a review, or if a family member or friend gifts me yarn, I'll accept it. I'm not going to be that strict about it. So that's an exception. The other exception is if I am knitting on a project and I run out of yarn on an active whip, I will allow myself to buy yarn to be able to complete that project and put it to rest. But I'm not going to be buying yarn just willy-nilly. Those are the very specific exceptions to the no buy. Outside of that, I don't plan to acquire any yarn. I don't want to add to my stash. I want to use it up, and I want to use up as much of it as possible. Now, obviously, I'm going to plan to knit through the projects that I shared with you, but that's kind of like at a bare minimum. Realistically speaking, I will have the capacity to knit far more than the specific projects that I included on this list. So I'm very optimistic that I'm going to make a huge dent in my current yarn stash situation. More to come on that, because I do plan to record a yarn stash or flash my stash type of video where I share with you all of the sweater quantities that I have in my yarn collection and the sweaters that I plan to make with that yarn. It's going to be sort of a more extensive version of what I shared today in terms of the sweater projects that I plan to knit in 2023. So if that is a video that interests you, stay tuned. But other than that, yeah, that is the great no buy of 2023. So myself, Taji of Tangles and Starlight, or Stitches and Starlight here on YouTube, and Felicia of One Whip Wonder here on YouTube and over on Instagram. I will link their profiles down below. We have teamed up, the dynamic duo, the trinamic trio. We came together and decided to create a safe space for those of you who are also interested in doing some type of no buy or stash down in 2023 and would like a group of like-minded people to hold you accountable. We started a Discord group. There are tons of chat threads going on. It's very active, which makes me so excited. I probably am not as active. I'm definitely not as active as I would like to be. I don't tend to be in like group message thread situations like that. But every few days I have been logging on and getting caught up on all of the posts that you guys have shared. People are sharing their stashes. People are sharing their stash down goals, their no buy goals, and all of the stipulations that they're holding themselves accountable to. People are connecting locally. So there are a few people who didn't know each other before and realize, hey, we're in the same city or state. And so there's probably going to be some fun in-person meetups there. People are talking about fiber festivals. I think the great thing about this is that nobody is being as extreme as me. I think I'm the only one who's doing a hard and fast no buy for the entire year. A lot of people are just saying, I want to reduce my stash. I want to knit primarily from my stash. I want to end the year with a smaller stash than I started the year. And I think those are all really respectable goals, but even the most seemingly insignificant of those can be really difficult to stick to. And so when you have a group of people to hold you accountable, I think it just sort of ensures your success and gives you a shoulder to cry on or a group of people to share your victories with. And so I think as the year unfolds, it's going to be really fun to see all of the stash domination that we all achieve throughout the year. And with the Discord group, there's going to be a really casual knit along situation for every quarter in 2023. So you will pick a project with yarn or fiber, if you're spinning, for example, that is already in your stash, and you're going to commit to see that project to completion for that particular quarter. We haven't discussed anything in terms of giveaways or prizes for the knit along. I don't think we're going to go down that path, but it's more so a way for us to sort of commit to and showcase all of our accomplishments and do it all together by way of a knit along. So my first quarter project is going to be the Ward sweater that I mentioned earlier. And I just think it's really going to be fun. So I'll link the Discord down below. Feel free to join or just to snoop to see what people are sharing. And throughout the year for 2023, since we're talking about 2023 plans, as far as this YouTube channel is concerned, I'm hoping to come to you guys with a video at least once a month sharing my no buy progress. Obviously, the projects that I'm making, the yarn I'm using up, I think you can consider it a standard podcast format where I share all of the stuff I knit every month or crocheted every month, and what my whips are at the time of recording the video, things like that. And really just a way for me to check in and share my successes as it relates to the no buy. Hopefully no failures. Hopefully I can stay strong, but that's the idea. I mean, just looking at my stash now, which at this point is for the most part been logged into Ravelry, if I do the math, there's probably well over $2,000 worth of yarn in my stash. And it's a shame that it's just sitting there. So I need to use it. And that's really the whole idea behind the no buy. But yeah, if you have any questions about the no buy, if you want to check out the Discord, feel free. Leave me a comment below. I would love to chat to you guys to know what your 2023 making goals are. If it's a no buy, if it's a buy, all the things, everyone is welcome here. Don't take anything that I'm doing with my personal knitting practice as a judgment or reflection on what I think about any of you guys and what you're doing with your stash. I think it's all great. If it makes you happy, if you like it, if you're enjoying yourself, go for it. But I've talked enough. I'm going to go enjoy my New Year's evening. In the meantime, have a wonderful, I hope you had a wonderful holiday season, New Year, whatever you celebrate. I hope it was lovely, and yeah, I'm excited to see what else 2023 has in store for us. So the next video will be my stash tour. Stay tuned for that if you're curious to know all of the other projects that I have planned with this monstrosity behind me. And yeah, I'll talk to you then. Bye.